When you're investigating a case, you don't try and fit the evidence into what your theory is. That's when mistakes happen.
So what we want to do is follow the evidence first. Let's gather the evidence. Let's find out what it is. Be curious, put it all together before we close our minds. In other words, let's begin with an open mind. Did you know there is a splinter in this case, and it is quite maddening as well? I actually think that this splinter is a key, perhaps even a better key, a stronger key to solving this case than the potentially inconclusive DNA sample that John wants to make or break this case. Imagine if they test that DNA and it comes out inconclusive. And now you're saying this is the key, the only key to solving this case. And so I want you to keep an open mind, and in terms of that, think about this evidence, this splinter, as potentially very, very important information.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Let's look at a few questions regarding the splinter that was found in JONBENET. Okay, so where does it come from? Possibly from the paintbrush, which we know was broken on two ends, and need I say, the paintbrush is made of wood. By the way, if you want to fashion a garrote, why use a dinky little stick, almost a twig, and why break the ends off of it? And if you think about it, if it's so easy to break the ends off, if you're trying to use this stick for the purposes that it appeared to be used for, why on earth would you use such a dinky little thing, a stick that could easily break? And again, like, why break the ends off of it? If you need it just for that purpose, why do that? Unless what you're fashioning isn't a garrote. And that is a very important question that we need to consider and develop a separate synthesis for. What is this stick and string thing? Why is it the way it is? And that might tell us who made it. What does this mean? Well, one interpretation is that the paintbrush was inserted into JONBENET. The one end of the handle of the garrote was inserted into JONBENET. If so, this suggests one of several reasons why the stick thingy wasn't a garrote. It certainly wasn't made for one express purpose. That much appears to be clear. Are there other possibilities? The hand that fashioned the paintbrush probably assaulted JONBENET. In other words, the hand holding the paintbrush, the hand that broke the paintbrush, may have gotten cellulose fibers onto it in the process of breaking it. But it remains a kind of chicken and egg argument in a sense. I mean, whether it was a hand holding a stick or a hand that had held the stick, it's really just a matter of how much hand and how much stick rather than either or, at least in my opinion. Which brings up the question, was any evidence found on the paintbrush stick? Well, have a look at these excerpts from the Bow Technology, that's the lab that dealt with the DNA investigation in March 2008. And look at point number 2, dealing with the paintbrush sample 2S0702 were not processed at this time. So have they not tested it, or have they tested it and the results are secret? Why not test these items when they are so obvious, so apparently integral to the crime? Unless you know, or you don't want to know, what the evidence is going to be or where it's going to lead you. At a minimum, if the stick was used as part of the assault, surely JONBENET's DNA would be found in it, and you can at least have certainty on that aspect of the crime. What insight can we synthesize from this? First of all, the paintbrush scenario suggests that this aspect of the attack on JONBENET occurred in the basement. There are several reasons to believe this is likely. The basement is a relatively secure space. It's a relatively out-of-the-way location, probably the most out-of-the-way location in the house. And then the proximity to the wine cellar and the train room and the basement window. And then the fact that the paint tote was found there as well. Now consider the following from Detective Steve Thomas's book, JONBENET, Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation, when we're thinking about where could this crime have happened in terms of other evidence. On page 37 he writes, "In the far corner of the basement, just outside the small room where the body had lain, Detective Mike Everett discovered a half-dozen oil paintings on canvas and an artist's plastic tote box belonging to Patsy. In the tote was a broken brush splotched by paint. Splinters were on the floor beside the tote. It was a major find because the broken brush matched the fractured end of the multicolored stick used in the garrote. The detectives had found the source of part of the murder weapon and where it had been broken." Now, unless the crime didn't happen in the basement and the tote was transported to the basement like JONBENET, like the blanket, possibly even the knife from somewhere else, then, how do we explain this evidence? But the splinters are on the floor right next to it, next to the tote, which suggests that's where the garrote was made and that's where the essay happened, and that is where JONBENET died. Except one splinter is missing. The end of the paintbrush was never found. This again makes one wonder, if the splinter is somewhere else, is that where the crime happened? And you might think you are overthinking this aspect, but think about the ransom note not having any fingerprints on it and also not being picked up. The location of the ransom note is also quite hinky in this case. So back to this notion, the end of the paintbrush is never found. This again makes one wonder, if the splinter is somewhere else, is that where the crime happened? And if it happened somewhere else, where else might the tote have been lying around, if not the basement? Anything else? Well, this action, a stabbing action with a sharp stick into a sensitive area, couldn't that have triggered a scream? And wasn't it the blow to the head that cut off the scream? But how could someone be on the floor with a paintbrush causing a scream and seconds later standing over JONBENET with a bat, unless there were two perpetrators? Interestingly, in one of his earlier interviews, Burke speculated that his sister had been stabbed, and I think he's right. With a bit of license, with a piece of wood, although the stabber probably didn't anticipate this penetrative action being so painful for its recipient. Now, coming back to the idea of how to think about thinking, what strategy to use to investigate effectively, do you notice we aren't making absolute statements? We're asking questions at various layers and allowing those layers to address other questions and other evidence. When we do that, what are we doing? We are integrating evidence. We are gathering it and trying to reconcile it with itself. If it integrates into a cohesive whole, great, we might be dealing with reality. But then there's another section to this whole process. This can only be reality if this hypothesis integrates seamlessly with everything else. Only if that occurs is it truly cohesive. And so, is it? So what we need to do is reconcile the splinters with the paint stick to find out who we are, and in this case, who our ace of diamonds is.